Hey everyone. Today I would like to present a brief discussion on how elitist mentality in the education system leads to unfair distribution of money for schools. I am aware that people may hold a different opinion than myself, but this is just my perspective, and this presentation is only meant to bring some sort of awareness to this topic. First, let me introduce this presentation by talking about the cost that goes into paying for college, a process that most people are familiar with. Everyone has a different financial situation. You can get money to pay for college by being awarded grants from your state or federal government. Or maybe you've been awarded scholarships from different organizations. Or perhaps you were working at a job while in high school or college. It's nice to have all these available to you. If you can obtain all of these, then consider yourself a fortunate individual. You were probably exposed to the right information on how to obtain money to pay for your higher education. There are people who were not fortunate to come across the right information early on in their elementary education to guide them on these matters due to certain circumstances. This presentation will not be about paying for college, though. That's a whole topic for another time. That was just an introduction to the idea about finances that go into schools, just to get the mind going. Private school or public school? Some of you may have attended public schools, and others may have attended private school. If you attended private school, you know by now your families were paying hundreds of dollars, even thousands of dollars a year to attend a private school. If you attended public school, you know that came at little to no cost for your caretakers. Based on my research on private schools, these types of schools require screenings of their potential students and their families. This means private schools are selective about who they let in. These families, usually high-income families, understand this process and accept it since it means their child will be in an environment where they praise and encourage enthusiasm for learning. Classes in private schools are generally smaller, consisting of as little as 32 students in all 4 grades. With that being said, this allows teachers to have a better interaction with the student body, thus allowing for a better exposure and retention rate of academic materials. Private schools are funded differently from public schools, and because of that, there is a dramatic difference between academic outcomes of both institutions. Privately funded schools also have a special access to Ivy League colleges, but we will revisit this later. Now let's talk about public schools. Public schools are institutions funded by the federal and state government. These types of schools are accessible all throughout the U.S. in a variety of neighborhoods. The majority of children in this country attend public schools and have just about the same programs as private schools. Sadly, not all public schools are built the same. Poor social and economic circumstances contribute to the decline of the educational system within the public sector. Bullying, as we know, has a downstream effect on students. Due to the very fact of the trauma associated with bullying, students retreat to a psychological safe haven, which would lead them to go with the flow if it affords them a level of protection. Lack of funding towards public schools can also be due to despicable political games within the education system, which is witnessed daily on the news concerning corruption and self-interest of political figures who negate their responsibility to the public. The education system of this country has been accused many times before of squandering and misappropriation of funds. This is especially true in low-income neighborhoods where board members and officials can easily manipulate funding since people who live in impoverished neighborhoods are preoccupied with other life issues. When the public is unaware of how funding becomes available for their schools, then that funding can become suspicious bonuses for certain officials. As if this wasn't bad enough, low-income neighborhoods are full of disadvantages. There can be environmental hazards nearby. people trying to get by with a low-wage job. English may not be their first language. And there's an abundance of students and a lack of schools. We can turn to the past for a minute for a deeper understanding of this situation. History has shown that discrimination has been a big problem. White Europeans settled into this country over 400 years ago. Europeans had more time to establish their wealth and social status. During that growth, whites used Black and Native American slaves to grow their wealth by making the slaves do all the hard work. Even though today slavery has been abolished, the racist feelings towards minorities is still present today. Discrimination and condescending judgment towards non-white citizens of this country gets in the way of progressive change. Let's go back to private schools. Those that can't afford the expense of a private education are typically families from affluent neighborhoods. These high-income earners usually have a college degree as well. Recall what I said earlier about European settlers. Take all that into consideration, and it will start to make sense as to why these families will choose private schools for their children. With private schools, you get what you pay for. Great class engagement, the best in advanced programs, and with the addition of parents being aware or even participating in the educational experience, private schools can serve as a great support to their child's education. Oh, and as for that special connection with Ivy League colleges, wealth gains you entrance into the most exceptional schools in the nation. Those that have wealth get in, and those that lack wealth suffer. Now, the goal of this presentation is not to bash public schools or private schools. The goal of this presentation is to present a clearer picture of the diversities between wealth and poverty among the citizens of the U.S. and the education system. However, it's worth mentioning that the officials who govern the money for public school education do not do enough or simply turn a blind eye to questionable maneuvering of funds. Also, these higher officials in public school education tend to stick to traditional methods of assessing students' learning capabilities, and for years now, that has shown to be an insufficient way of measuring students' academic capabilities. Public schools should consider how engaged in learning students become when having access to the right tools and sources from the start of their education. Private funding has clearly been of interest as a way and a means to provide tuition outside of the normal state and government aid. By making available necessary funds towards impressive programs and materials, that can result in a natural enthusiasm for learning, just as you see from students at private schools. So in conclusion, someday students will become young adults who will step into responsible roles that will change the society of this country. There is a great disparity in the education system that needs to be addressed, and until that is addressed, American education will always be a one-sided affair. My name is Eva Reyes, and I thank you for listening to my presentation.